Good morning and welcome to Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our city tick. And nothing ticks more than Pundit Friday, which we're about to begin here in the WNHA studio with the number one pundits in the media universe running down the headlines of the week. Pundits like the dairy-free goddess of our grassroots radio operation, the woman you can't stop listening to, so you kind of run into walls and forget what you're doing because you're just so mesmerized all the time. Babs Rawls Ivy. And that actually was an accurate statement. I have the bruises to show it.
Oh, my gosh.
The queen of
so
quipery and the
funny.
quintessence of compassion, the voz hispana publisher Norma Rodriguez Reyes.
Hola.
The flyest news hunter-gatherer this side of Fleet Street. Star New Haven independent reporter Marquisha Reyes.
Happy Friday.
The WNHA station manager, Heavy D Donald Trump devotee Harry Drost, the bravest man in New Haven.
That is not Joe Ugly.
What up?
Joe
Drama
Ugly,
king.
Joe Ugly, our resident professor, has a note from his parents and from his principal
Oh.
that he is allowed to show up tardy today without being marked tardy. So he will make up for it with so much insight in the second half of
I
our
bet he
show.
will.
Well, what an interesting news week, folks. And I did not bring you here I brought you here under false pretenses. We call it the Pundits, but this is really a faculty meeting at the university.
Thank you, Harry. It's like telepathy.
In the
It's like
ju-
I'd like candy.
A faculty meeting in the journalism department of the for-profit University of Second Chances and Cast No Stones. And I've gathered you, esteemed journalism professors, to really plumb an issue in how we report the news that struck me this morning. We had what I considered a fantastic article in the New Haven Independent this morning, written so well, that raises questions to me when I look at the reaction to it, into how we should do our job and tackle some of the most important nuanced issues in our community, and then how people read it and to what extent we can contribute to it being talked about in a productive way, and to what extent it's good that we can't control how it's talked about. Okay, have I laid the groundwork, folks? You get where I'm coming from?
Yes.
Okay, so let me just lay out what I thought was so impressive about this story. So yesterday, some ICE agents, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, showed up at the Elm Street Courthouse. This has been a big issue because ICE has gotten more aggressive in catching people who aren't here legally. They've started coming to courthouses, and that's proved controversial. The one side says you shouldn't go there because people come there for other reasons, and if they know ICE agents aren't there, they're not going to come, and then our society's less safe because people aren't going to come to have justice. So for instance, one guy yesterday who was there for motor vehicle offenses, but he had to wonder whether to go in because he's worried, well, then will I be caught for being a deportee? And then he's got new problems building up. This other case, we haven't resolved it. On the other side are the pro-ICE people who say these people aren't here legally. They're being arrested for other crimes. You got to catch them where they are. So that's the backdrop. So they show up yesterday going after someone whom no one would be sympathetic to. They were going there to catch someone who has been convicted of raping a teenage girl. Okay?
Terrible.
So he's there for a sentencing, and he's coming before a judge, and they're there to try to nab him. And in the end, they didn't even take him home. The judge didn't allow them in the courtroom. That's kind of interesting. And he's going to be in detention a couple of days, so he's going to finish the state process, and then they're going to get him. So they're going to get this guy. And in fact, they would have gotten the guy even if they didn't show up at the courthouse. But what was interesting about the story is what their presence meant for everybody else in this ongoing debate. So our reporter, Chris Peak, was on the scene. And I'll tell you just quickly why I thought his reporting was so good. He figured out who they were, even though they didn't have their jackets. And he actually stood there and listened into their private conversations and reported on it with the prosecutor about how they're going to proceed. And the reason that was important was because different prosecutors have different approaches to what to do about this. And it turns out the prosecutor in that courthouse is very open to letting ICE agents work with them, although not the way they are in Arizona. He's not volunteering information to ICE to tell them about people they didn't know about. But he's also not doing what some other advocates want and some other prosecutors do, which say, please don't come in the courthouse. Our reporter also got an audience with the judge. Private audience you rarely see with a reporter. And he talked on the record about why he doesn't allow ICE in the courtroom. And this reporter also, Christopher Peak, interviewed the advocates and made it real clear they were not defending the guy who raped a girl. They weren't there to protect the guy who's convicted of raping a girl. They were there on behalf of other immigrants who have to make the decision about whether to walk in that courthouse. Okay? So that was clear, and that was clearly stated. And the other thing I thought he did was amazing, was he actually found a guy waiting outside who had just, got caught with a bad bumper light or something, some motor vehicle offense. and he's deciding whether
Which
to
is a
risk
classic reason why black and
Yeah.
brown folks are stopped
What
by the
did he
police.
do? Did he just pick a brown guy standing on the sidewalk?
I think the advocates might have known him, Harry.
Oh, and pointed him out.
I'm not sure. Somebody pointed him out. I'm not sure. That's a good question.
Don't
Because then
look at
he's
me like that,
profiling.
Babs. You would have said the same thing. It was a black dude.
Actually, Professor Jaws has a really good point there. We do profile as journalists. We guess based on criteria that if police use those same reasons to guess, they would be profiling, and that's not good, and that's why it's a complicated question. But in any case, he did great reporting, and the guy in the end decided to go in and take his chance, and that's what's good reporting. So I was very excited about publishing the story. The immediate reaction was, how could you, boy, you immigration advocates, you're going to bat for a guy who raped a girl.
Which
Now,
is clearly.
now that's clearly not what they did, and the advocates were clear about, we're here to talk about other people who might be swept up, and this is about the issue. And the other thing he did so great in the story is he had the presence in mind, Chris, to interview the prosecutor about why they take the stand they do about cooperating with ICE on certain cases they ask about, but not calling them up to tell them about other people. And he even got an expert afterwards on a short deadline to talk about what the law does and doesn't say. So Chris checked every box. He wrote it in a way that didn't protect one side of the argument. He let you know this guy did rape a girl. So you could read that if you don't agree with immigration reformers. This wasn't an advocacy story. It was an in-depth article. So you could see it, all the information's there, and then you get to decide. But the way the debate quickly veers off is focusing just on the fact that an immigrant raped somebody. What do we do as journalists with that discussion and the way we present information?
You know what I think usually happens? People don't read the entire story. They only read the first paragraph or maybe even the second.
Okay, that part was like the 8th paragraph. There was a paragraph before. I agree with you, Norma. That is one of the issues. So he was careful. He quoted the organizers up top about what the issue was. But Norma's right. But also people, and it's okay. You know, partly as journalists, I don't think it's our job to tell people you should care more about this or that. We should look at it what we think the big issues are and put in the order we think is right. But one thing I like about web journalism is that right away, people who find something in the 8th graph, the 10th graph, decide that's what they want to talk about. And sometimes they're right. You know, sometimes we didn't think about it. Sometimes they're wrong, or sometimes we just disagree.
It's because sometimes it's hidden somewhere in the middle of, you know, the news is really hidden because you get opinion pieces wrapped around the news.
Or other times, you know, if you cover a fire, Harry, 10 things happen. And the 2 different journalists will cover it different ways, and they'll both be right.
Absolutely.
It'll all be facts. It'll all be news. But one person
that's
might
true.
write, this a fire took place at a home where the landlord's been cited 10 times for arson or, you know, bad conditions. Somebody else will write, a dog died in a fire that required 10
And somebody
firefighters.
else will write that these firefighters did this heroic thing to save
Right.
this person in the building.
And we'll all be right, which is why we need more than one journalism outlet in a community. And as to Harry's point, I think it's very legitimate that someone will go in the 10th graph and say, hey, I think the most important thing is the landlord's record, or I think the important thing is the... So I don't think we should control the news as journalists. The debate has to go where it's going to go. But we aren't innocent in that if we highlight something just to try to get clicks or to get people upset because of prejudice, we can sometimes make it like Fox News does or MSNBC. You know, it kind of gets it off the rails. So,
and I think that's actually where my thought process is going, which is that so people watch so much news that kind of supports how they feel about an issue. And I use the word news very lightly because the folks that they watch are taking a stance, right? Whether it's Fox News or whether you think it's CNN. Like they're taking a certain position, it seems to people, and so people spend so much time watching talking heads talk about the news and their opinions about the news. Some of them informed opinions, some of them not. As opposed to actually reading real news where people report. They just report.
Although we also do have biases, so we decide
Absolutely.
every decision about whether you're talking about the heroic firefighter or the landlord with the bad record, those are still opinions, but what we try to do as journalists is to try to be honest. We know we have opinions that we think important, but we're really going to include all sides and all information because the point of the article is to get people talking about it. Not to pretend we're unbiased, but that we're really going to be thorough and fair and get everything in, which Chris did. So Chris got in that the guy raped the
Exactly.
girl.
I think what he did probably is closest to what one could consider fair, which is that he's literally getting not the opinions of people, but literally what they're doing, supplemented by some opinion from, say, the judge and the prosecutor about why they do what they do.
And in fact, this was like if you spent a semester on a term paper,
Yeah.
Chris did that in one
On
day,
one day.
about what all the points were. But I guess what I feel like is like I do think it's important we don't steer conversations only where we want them to go, but that we're also constructive and we're not trying to play into prejudices and do our best to be fair and present everything well. I don't like where this conversation went. I don't think.
I don't know that you can do anything about that, though.
Yeah, because we shouldn't hide it. We can't leave out the point that the
and
person.
I don't even think it's about
you can't do
hiding it.
anything.
I think our job is to put the information out there, and it's funny that we're having this conversation because I actually spent Monday with, or was it Monday or Tuesday, with young people who are going to be in like a journalism intensive for like the next 8 weeks. And so
that's Lucy Gilman's art journalism project. Wonderful, wonderful thing she's doing. Yeah.
So they're pitching stories, and so we did a little exercise where they kind of pitched the story that they're interested in to me.
How fun.
And so one young woman wanted to, so she felt a certain way about the way the mayor does her job, and she feels like the neighborhood that she's from, I forgot to ask her what neighborhood she's from, but that there are things happening in that neighborhood that, she's like, the mayor's visits there, but I don't know how connected she is to what's happening in this particular neighborhood. And so what she'd like to do is follow the mayor around for a day. I was like, are you prepared to have your mind changed? I said, because the mayor is the mayor of the entire city. And when you see her in your neighborhood, that's however many other neighborhoods she's not in that day. And, oh, by the way, she's also head of this African American Mayors Association, which has a national mission. And, oh, by the way, like so all the people that work for her, the police chief, the fire chief, they're supposed to be the ones addressing those things that you have concerns about. And like, that's why all these people work in city government, right? Like all the issues she has, like that you have, that doesn't mean that your mayor should be invisible to you. But are you prepared to start your day with her at whatever time the mayor starts her day? And we all know that the mayor sometimes isn't in her day ever. Like some days, 16 hours. And can you keep up? That's my question. Can you keep up with the mayor? So are you prepared to have and I don't know that because I hang out with the mayor a whole lot necessarily, but I have seen her do her work. And I'm like, and also, we have to start from the idea that you need to know. So those are the types of things that journalists do, right? Like we're the ones who are going to follow somebody around for an entire day. We're going to sit at the courthouse all day and watch, what's happening. Or I'm going to go and sit in a court case all day and report everything. I remember seeing an article that Chris Peak did when he first got here, where he sat in court and they were doing the sentencing of a person who'd been involved in a gang murder. And people were so mad that he reported about the personal things that were said in open court about his background and his behavior being an abused child.
Which was really important information.
And was also important
crime.
to why, like how they were going to sentence this young man, because his lawyer was trying to seek some sympathy for him. Something that said some leniency that said, he had a bad childhood and you should take that into account. But people were legitimately mad about that. So they thought we had gone too far, that we'd given too much detail. I was like, you could have sat in court the same way we did and got the same information.
And sometimes, and your point's good, because sometimes you do leave stuff out. Like
yeah,
sometimes
absolutely.
there's not a reason to put in embarrassing things about people that don't advance a public debate. So what I found so challenging about this story, so to me, this immigration story he did this morning is a textbook example of the greatest possible reporting. In one day, getting so many big issues, getting so many sides, while it's happening, jumping on every piece of information you can grab that's hard to get, and then asking the right questions and laying it all out there intelligently. So here I think we have the most amazing possible example of good reporting. And I'm unhappy of where the discussion went. And yet I think, and sometimes it is our fault. Like if we're just really highlighting something to get people angry that violates people's privacy, that is only shading one side of an issue.
And I think that's unethical if we're doing that. Like for me, that's about ethics.
Sometimes we do it without even realizing because we're human and we have biases.
But that's not what you're saying you're doing.
I'm
that's not
saying
what you're doing.
No, that's what the challenge is here. Here, I think I can't imagine a better story than that story.
Mm-hmm.
No, yeah, because look.
And I really don't like where it went.
You're a grassroots paper, right? And the grass over here in New Haven
got weeds, but
well, the thing is that you're representing this portion of it, so it's okay to have whatever headline you got, as long as you have the truth in the article, and that's what he did. It doesn't matter.
So it's not about him. It's about
it's not about him. It's about the people.
He did everything he's supposed to do.
Look, he did everything he's supposed to do. If I read the article and I want to complain about something, you can't.
Of course not. So let me tell you how I moderate the comments, okay? So I saw where this was going. And a lot of people are talking about the language you used, thought it might have been biased or not in a case, or how could you be championing this case? So it's very important to me as a moderator that those points get out. And I knew because there were so many, that's going to steer the conversation. I did zap some of the comments where I feel like they speak in unkind ways about immigrants or make a general comment. So those people are going to feel like I'm getting sensitive because we should have 20 comments making that same point instead of 6. But, So in the end, I would run that story over and over and over again, the way we ran it. But it does make me realize that sometimes we really do have a lot of responsibility for taking debates in wrong places. And sometimes it's
I
not
know,
about
but you
right or
don't.
wrong.
You're not taking
Yeah.
the debate in the wrong
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
You're not doing that. Other people get to chime in, and they take the debate other places. You can't be responsible for people's media ignorance or
agree.
media illiteracy.
Or in this case, sometimes I just disagree with them. Maybe
And
they're
it's
totally
fine.
that's legit and that's
Yeah.
fine. That's
Yeah.
fine too.
And
But
I
it's-
think beyond
but I
the
don't wanna-
moderation that we do that other places don't do, like if they get a bit hijacked in that sense, I think they're ultimately, because these stories tend to have legs, right, in terms
Yeah.
of commenters, and so people are going to keep commenting over the weekend, maybe even
and
over
the
the rest of the
commenters
next
don't
month.
represent everyone who reads it.
They don't, but the people who really care about the issue are going to jump in, right, and so that is a
Yeah.
modern conversation on
And we
the
believe
internet.
and we
that is-
believe in the First Amendment, more discussion better. rather than less.
exactly, but you can't come into our living room and just talk crazy.
But to be fair, immigrant rights advocates are pretty critical of how we cover a lot of this stuff. Like they didn't like when
And
we,
I
when-
feel
when-
like if both sides are a bit critical, we've done our job.
Like last
That's
time,
as close
like
to
we
fair
give
as
a
we can
lot of
get.
space. Like for instance, Chris has really tough questions for the prosecutor who does cooperate with ICE, and he does really good reporting showing that there's reasons not to agree with him. But the immigrant rights advocates were the ones who really hated the last time he did that because they felt it gave too much space to the person they considered the bad guy.
I mean, and
many
you
whereas we
have
felt
people
we were
who
giving
aren't
them a
going to
chance
want
to
them to
explain.
have any space. They're not going to want them, and I don't think that's fair. And I'm someone who am very sympathetic to that
Yeah, me too.
side of the argument. But
Yeah.
at the same time, just because I don't like what somebody's doing, they still get to explain why they do,
And not
why
only
it's
that-
legal and everything, even if I don't like it.
And that's why I'd be kind of a bad activist because I really believe that the best way the side you think is good is going to win is if the other side actually gets to fairly say it completely and everybody gets to
And
hear
the way
all sides.
You know
Every
what?
civil
I
rights
think
fight
that
has
when
landed.
So we
people's minds
understand.
are already made up, okay, they don't get swayed by the argument or by the
They're not even
different points of
listening.
views that they read. They're not going to be swayed because their mind is not open to it. They've already have a certain position on immigration, and there's nothing that could be said or that they could read that will change their
You know,
mind.
Norm, I think that's sometimes true unless you do really good journalism. Like I've even seen Harry Drozo has a strong opinion. When he hears about certain individual cases, he thinks there's nuance. I think that's what gets back to me. Like if I hear a cop who kills a black man, a white cop, if I hear him speak at length of why he did it, I actually think that can let everyone understand better why it happened. It doesn't excuse why he did it, as long as you put
but
in
they're
all
going to
sides.
still
We're
be
not normal.
people.
We're not the normal
Exactly.
people out there.
And we wouldn't be still trying to turn back women's reproductive rights. We wouldn't still be trying to take back the rights that LGBTQ people have. If there weren't those people who are never going to be swayed, they're never going to. I don't care how good the reporting is. They don't care.
You know,
They
I
literally
found-
like, this
I
is
found
my
in life
opinion.
That people do. I find that I have great conversations with people I don't agree with, where we share why we feel so strongly based on our life experiences, and that we do hear each other. I agree that's hard to do. That.
I
that-
think you're
You
getting
know
at a minority of people,
or
though.
when they will change their mind when it hits home.
Mm.
When it's their son, their daughter,
Their
or
mama.
someone that's right, that's
Mm-hmm.
related to them, that's blood, then all of a sudden they have a change of heart.
But also the kind of biased reporting on all sides makes it harder too. If people aren't dumb, they know they're getting only part of the story. It's hard. It does make them harden in their positions when there's this torrent of information that's just aimed at having you think a certain way rather than understand the big picture.
And
I think it's harder for
I'm
us
not
to cross
arguing that we
barriers.
escape from that, right? I think we are a reflection of our society, and we always have been. We've always had publications and news organizations that have taken positions, whether they were patron positions, they were paid to take those positions. We've always had this in journalism. I think as modern journalism has progressed, there are those of us who've tried to stay fair. We've tried to do that.
Right, but
Like,
not to
we've
pretend we're unbiased.
No, but not to pretend we're unbiased.
And also, I think what we're being helped by is there's so much opinion on the internet. So many people get to weigh in.
And people just like, I just want information.
That it
I
doesn't
don't
even
want it
matter.
to be skewed by anybody's opinion about it. I just want information.
Like I used to write so many opinion articles, and people would read it, and then I came to realize now with the modern internet, no one cares who I think you should
Everybody-
vote for.
yeah,
But
no.
because everyone gets to weigh in, they kind of care like what you found out about.
Absolutely.
the
Like
people
the thousands of people that are running for governor of Connecticut. I don't care which one you like, even though you're my friend, so I trust you. So if you say somebody's, I'm going to still go check them out. I'm going to give them a bit more credence than just what they're
And that's-
telling
that's
me.
a great
Which I
example.
think is important.
And
But
in-
I need information. I need information. I don't need people I don't know's opinions about these people. I need information about what they say they're going to do and what they've done.
And I love that.
But these folks have time to, the people that need information, it's because they have time to look at the information. Whereas you have your common people out there,
It's like, I don't have time for that.
everyday folks out there that have 2 jobs, you know, that have a lot of issues going on in their family. They don't have time
But Norma,
to
they still
read
spend an
and
average
to
of-
do all this other stuff.
But-
So many times they do trust, you know,
Yeah.
whoever says what.
Yeah,
Mhm.
whoever
Although
says
Norma,
that.
there's an average 8 to 10 hours a day people are spending in front of screens, even when they're working.
But they're
hard.
getting information that somebody else has
Yeah.
vetted for them, like Facebook. Like Facebook's algorithm is telling
Yeah.
you this is what your news is today. And so it's, you know, you might get some actual news articles, but a lot of them are opinion pieces from right or left wing organizations and memes. Like people are getting their information through memes, so they're just reposting it, right? So like, and so you can, and as someone who has fell down like the social media rabbit hole many a day, you're like, Lord, I just lost 30 minutes of my life.
I know, never getting that time back.
And you never get it back. So I'm gonna, like, if I'm on Facebook, I might not jump off Facebook to go read the Washington Post from cover to cover or the New York Times from cover to cover because, oh, I just lost an hour on Instagram looking at cute dog photos. I don't, like, it happens.
I gotta tell you, heaven for me is like, because I can't be on the
Happens.
internet or electronics from sundown Friday to Saturday.
Which is
when that Saturday
good.
Times arrives
Yeah,
with the
we
Sunday
do that very
sections,
You're
and
like,
I can go
ooh.
cover to cover. My wife and I spent hours.
y'all even do the
just sitting
crossword.
yes,
Like
well,
they
the crosswords
just
afterwards
go
you have
in.
to write. Yeah. Well, anyway, you are here in the news and the filter on Pundit Friday on WNHH, your home for community radio, 103.5 FM, live streamed, NewHavenIndependent.org, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. And you're also listening in on a faculty meeting of the journalism department of the for-profit University of Second Chances and Cast No Stones. I got to.
Second chances and we should get a T-shirt with that on it, Paul, and put it on the website for
You know,
sale.
And now that I got all of you esteemed journalism professors here, I have another journalism question for you. This week, Markeisha Ricks wrote a really interesting story in our in the Independent that days later people are still commenting on. She was up at the Capitol, she meaning you, Markeisha. There was
Some other Markeisha.
the state of Connecticut has done some interesting research that I think is becoming a standard for the country to look at this whole racial profiling debate and get hard numbers. And then they brought some people who have been dealing with the issue for a long time, like Bill Dyson, a retired state rep, and then Robin Porter is at the forefront of the debate now. And they had a data-filled but personal also story fleshed out forum at the Capitol during the middle of a session when a lot of reporters are up there, a lot of people. And Markeisha was the only person who covered it. How did you come to cover it, and why were there no other reporters there? And what does that say about our discussion about race and racial profiling?
I will say that the House was in session, so
Yeah.
that probably played a role. Robin Porter actually had to run back and forth from the LOB to the Capitol
Legislative
building.
Office building, yeah.
Yeah, the Legislative Office building to the Capitol building to go vote because the bell would be ringing while she's trying to have this conversation about racial profiling. But, you know, it was something that was sent out as a press release among reporters. So it wasn't some hidden thing that nobody knew was happening. But not only was I the only reporter there, or there was one other, I think the Fox News station popped in for a second. But there really wasn't very many people in the audience to hear about this issue, which I thought was interesting in light of the Starbucks.
Let's hear it
incident
for
just happening.
yeah. Starbucks just happened. You wrote a great story, and people on all sides of this issue
Again,
have been
another issue that
reading
people
and
have
talking
opinions
about it. You gave the depth, so way to go. But yeah, it was a. But now, do you think the fact? Because I didn't tell you to cover it. I'm your editor.
Nope.
I didn't stop you.
I volunteered to cover
Do
it.
you think it's because you're an African American woman, or because you're from New Haven and there's a New Haven people? Why was it that we covered it and other people didn't? Or because we don't have to cover everything that happens in the House because that's not our mission and we use Connecticut News Junkie stories?
I think all of that is true. And there wasn't anything specific that News Junkie wasn't covering that we needed to cover. We didn't necessarily have a local issue that I was super pressed about, which probably would have made some difference, or I would have tried to cover them both. Because
Have you seen another African American reporter who writes articles up at the Capitol?
Not that writes articles. I've seen a couple of TV folks, and I think there's one guy on radio who either is, I don't know if he's African American. He sounds like he has an accent, so he might be Caribbean or African.
But do you think that's why? I mean, that is one of the whitest press corps
It
still
is,
around.
and most honestly, most. I think that's true of a lot of
And pretty
state
male, too, yeah.
legislative coverage, like press corps. I think that's just generally true. There also usually is not that many black and brown folk in people's legislatures, so there's that.
But we do have. I
but
mean,
we do.
Using
We
white
actually
math,
have a
Using white math, there are tons because it might not be a big percentage, but I can't even name all the people of color at the legislature.
exactly. But I mean, and actually, Connecticut probably is a bit more diverse than at least the legislature that I covered prior. Even though that one's
Which is kind of interesting. You were in the
pretty
South,
diverse.
where almost half the population was black, right?
yeah, but half the legislature was not black. But they had a
districts
pretty.
in Alabama.
But in Alabama, like it was white and black. There were no Latinos, so Latino people weren't being represented by anybody who happened to be Latino. Actually.
So now that's interesting. So is it fair to say in Alabama the reason
And we had one lesbian legislature.
the legislature was so much whiter than the population was that if that's because of gerrymandering, what was it like for you as an African American reporter to be covering the state capitol?
So we actually had a surprising number of African American journalists, more than I would have
So
expected.
newsrooms weren't as gerrymandered as the legislature.
Or at least I don't know about their actual newsrooms. Like, so Montgomery is like 50-50 white and black. So we had a number of stations that actually had black reporters. So that made a difference. So who they sent to the State House, Alabama Public Television had a black reporter. And they actually had several black reporters who actually covered the legislature, which was nice. When I worked at the Montgomery Advertiser, my executive editor was a black woman. Our publisher at the time was a black man. Our managing editor was a white woman at one point, and then we had a very diverse staff for that. Like
That
after,
doesn't happen here in the supposedly enlightened Northeast.
and I think that also is what's funny
Wow.
about like the assumptions that are made that Connecticut
Yeah.
would be way more liberal than Alabama, and in certain respects it is, but in certain respects it's not.
I remember that reminds me, like my wife and I. This is now, oh my God, going back to mid-80s. There was a Klan trial in North Carolina where some Klansman, a Ku Klux Klansman working with an FBI informant, had shot dead some anti-racism protesters. And my wife and I went to cover it for USA Today. So we went to Greensboro, North Carolina, and interviewed the police chief, who was black. And we were there as young know-it-all, or I was, my wife's not like that, and saying, like, trying to give him a hard time. Why do you have such racist police down here, that this allow this kind of thing to happen? He just looked at me, really nice guy. He said, are you from New Haven? He said, yeah, I used to be up in Bridgeport. I go, wow. He said, I didn't see too many black cops there. I didn't see too many people, white people living around black people. And we said, woo, we got, it is more nuanced.
That is hilarious.
Yeah,
Threw
Wow.
real shade at you.
He did. He was great. Very
He-
quiet way, very,
Yeah, very quiet way of throwing shade. That was nice. That's smooth.
know-it-all northern
That's
reporter.
High five
But,
that dude.
State Rep Robin Porter had a big week.
She
Not
did.
just that,
Yeah.
she's been championing a bill for pay equity. That would, it's better numbers than it used to be. 83 cents women make on the dollar, the man, but still not equal.
That's
The
all
white
women
woman.
and white women. I was
That's
about to say,
right.
because you dig down, if you drill down,
African-Americans
African American and
and
Latino
Latinos.
women, it's like something like 48 cents for Latino
Really?
women, 50 something cent for black
Wow.
women.
I didn't realize it was that low still.
Yeah.
And anyway, her bill says that if an employer cannot ask you about previous salary when you're being interviewed, so that then you won't have the assumption you're supposed to pay less. It passed 142-4 in the House. I mean, we're talking Republicans all voted for this with Democrats like Porter. So it's looking like it's in good shape if it gets over the line.
And
Big
in the
victory
Senate.
for her yesterday. It's interesting. I actually read stories that some advocates of pay equity say these bills end up hurting more than helping. Because the employers then make an assumption because you're a woman, you made
that you made less
little,
than.
and that in fact you might have made more.
I've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of small businesses about this whole 15-15.
What's 15.50?
Is that the minimum
15,
wage, the
yeah,
fight for
remember
15,
they wanted,
which is
was
not
it-
the same as this, but
They wanted to make
raise the
minimum wage
$15.
$15.
an hour?
Right. And they're saying that a lot of the small businesses will have to close because they cannot afford. And a lot of them have told me that. No, we can't afford to pay that much money to our employees.
But that's been a myth. Studies have not shown that to bear out.
Well,
It's not
how
100%,
about the
but
lot
they
of
said that
Latino businesses,
they've done studies where
small,
they have
minority businesses, maybe not your mainstream
get close.
small business, maybe not your mainstream small businesses, but we're talking about the minority-owned businesses. The African American,
And
the Latino
I would
But
think
businesses.
why
that's-
can't they just charge another 20 cents to give people
Because they got too much
diabetes with a
competition.
McDonald's? But
And
they all
I'm-
have to compete
I'm
for
actually
the same
thinking about
workers.
something different. So, just thinking about a business owner that I know, I think it's because minority businesses tend to be undercapitalized. They're more likely to be undercapitalized and more likely to be starting a business where possibly because of racial discrimination, they can't get the kinds of loans that white businesses
But
can
if
get.
everybody has to pay the same wage and that wage goes up, why does it put anybody at a disadvantage compared to anyone else if they have to raise prices to get that?
Because raising
raise.
prices isn't enough, right? Like, so if you're undercapitalized, let's say you own a restaurant and you're undercapitalized, right? So you're already charging what you're charging and paying what you can pay, right? And what people right now will pay for your services. But if you need capital to make payroll and you can't get the capital you need from out of your business, a lot of businesses are operating in the red, right? They're not operating in the black. They're not wealthy businesses to begin with. They're just getting by, if they're getting by at all. Now, I'm not making a case people should like do this, but this is just kind of the reality of the business. What is the cost of like meat for your restaurant goes up? What is the cost of all of your supplies? I know businesses that even in this current state have to let people go because the cost of their business, cost of their rent is high because maybe they rent from Yale. The cost
Rent,
of
insurance.
You have to have
They gotta
insurance
pay
on your
into,
employees.
unemployment.
You have to pay health fees
Yep.
to be open.
It turns out to be unrealistic to expect these small businesses to compete, especially with the large businesses. And the large businesses won't go for the minimum wage.
Right.
They'll
Exactly.
start
They have
replacing
plenty
you
of
with-
money.
with automatic counters, and so
And the smaller businesses are
It
who are
really
most
does
likely
hurt.
to employ people. Like Harry said, the bigger businesses are like, we've saved all this money so we can figure out a way to innovate and lay off more people so we can keep more money, which is
So yeah. So what you need to do is when you talk about increasing the minimum wage, you also need to make an analysis of how that's going to affect not your regular business, but your smaller businesses that are barely making it.
But I think the answer there is to stop discrimination against minority lenders. Like right now,
Absolutely.
the Congress is about to make it legal again to charge black people, just because they're black, higher interest for loans than white people.
Well, I mean, they've been doing
That's the
it.
core.
Even though it's been illegal, they have been doing
But
it.
until last
If
year,
they give you a loan, if
At
they
all,
give you,
if you
because they
get a
don't
loan,
give
if
you
you
a
get
a
loan.
loan.
Like right now, I freaked out. You know what? The loan is what, 3.5 or 4%. We have banks charging 7.5 for a refinance. A bank.
I call that a loan shark.
Well,
But we did have a
psychology.
Consumer Finance Protection Bureau whose
which
mission
they're
and work.
aren't they about to zero out
Well,
of the
that's what I'm
budget?
saying. And the rule is being changed now, whereas they used to have guidance to specifically go after the charging of different interest rates based on race, and that's being eliminated.
well, they're doing it. They're still doing it.
Harry Trost has nothing to say on that. Or?
well, no, and also when the Dodd-Frank bill went through, what it hurt was the small banks, the small businesses that would get those loans or give those loans. So there's a lot that goes into it. Now, that discrimination is ridiculous, right? Not,
Well, but that's the argument they're using. It's being championed by the Republican Party, saying this is part of our getting rid of over-regulation from Dodd-Frank. You're saying that sometimes specific regulations shouldn't be all swept along.
well, not all the regulations.
You see, people's minds
Obviously.
see things with nuance here on Pundit Friday.
Harry actually reads though. He attempts to understand. That's not like Norman said. There's Harry and then there's everybody else.
And there's Pundit Friday
like,
on
Spoon feed
WNHH.
me my thoughts.
There's Pundit Friday on WNHH 103.5 FM, livestreamnewhaven.org. You're listening to the best pundits in the media universe go over the headlines of the week. Another thing happened in the Capitol this week. The Connecticut news junkie Christine Stewart followed it very closely. There was an African-American woman who is a lobbyist for Planned Parenthood.
No lobbying while black.
And she had a button that said, stand with black women.
It's the same button that I think Robin Porter actually wears on the House floor.
There's a state senator who's been for 22 years representing Hartford and Wethersfield, pretty large minority population. He's white. And before that, he spent another 10 years as a state rep in the same district, John Fanfaren. He went up there, he said, I need a stand with white men pin.
Thanks, Harry.
And she said, that is not a way to be talking. And, even if you didn't represent people of color. And it blew up. And so
you
I
represent
wish she
people
would
of
have just
color.
taken that
Gary
pin and smacked
Winfield.
him in the head.
Stabbed him in the
Gary
eye with it.
Winfield. And then she has to lobby him, and yet she was willing to, incur his ire. And then Gary Winfield,
She probably should run against him if she can.
state senator, and 13 organizations
I'd be
called,
like, oh.
issued a call for outrage.
When he
He was-
issued his apology, he didn't even use her name. He's like, to that woman,
To that
or that
woman.
woman that
To the
that
woman.
lobbied me in the Capitol.
Yeah,
I'm
like,
sorry.
I'm sorry. Her name is what again? You didn't say it.
I did.
No, not you.
Not
I'm
you,
just saying.
him.
Oh, maybe I
in
did.
his,
No, maybe I
in
didn't say
his
it.
No, you
Arvia
did. You
Walker.
said
he did
RVA
not
from Planned Parenthood.
did
Yeah.
not use her
Any
name.
thoughts, Harry? No, because some people would say he was an idiotic thing to say, but maybe there was an overreaction to it, in your opinion?
Well, it's a dumb thing to say, but what he was doing was making a point that would never land, so he shouldn't have said it. You know. So.
Well, the point is sort of the Trump reaction of his voters that black people, why are getting all this attention, white
No,
lives count too,
no,
and that kind of
Right. That's not the point. It's all the Black Lives Matter, the All Lives Matter. Is that point that gets lost in between, that you can't compare the two, but everybody does try to compare it. So
All right. Well, I say shout out to Arvia Walker. She stood up.
Go,
takes,
girl.
It takes
Mhm.
people who have something to lose by speaking out. Because lobbyists, I mean, there was a great story in the Times about nationwide, all these lobbyists, both parties, get that legislators would force sex on lobbyists, and lobbyists felt they had too much at stake to blow the whistle. They didn't always have sex with the people, but sometimes they did. But that powerful people in government, both parties, would require you sleep with them or really harass you pretty bad, and that you
I
felt that you
haven't
would lose your
noticed-
contracts.
Maybe I have noticed it here. I definitely noticed at the Alabama legislature that the women dressed a particular way, that they had to be dressed to catch the eye, because there are a lot of old men in legislatures. Let's be clear about that. A lot of old men. You know, the Alabama Beverage Association is dropping off alcohol to people. Like, so I very much believe that that's going on, and I don't believe that it's something that is particularly hidden.
Mm-hmm.
But there are definitely women in 5-inch heels, tight skirts, and you're like, girl, it's 8:00 in the morning. We gonna dress like that. Not a hair out of place, face beat to death. Like, you're like, girl, where you going?
Did you guys ever care at
She's
all?
being an Esther.
Mhm.
She was looking like an escort.
Oh, Markeisha Rich.
That was good.
So I don't see it as much in Connecticut, but I do see a couple of female lobbyists. So it's like,
But you know, that's also
men
very
don't have to
cultural.
do
It's
that,
very
though.
cultural. You know how they talk about the Southern belles, and then a lot of the Latinas, you go to
they
Puerto
weren't wearing
Rico.
hoop skirts.
You,
They weren't wearing
okay.
hoop skirts and fans and drinking mint juleps.
And just to be clear, you're not saying that means they're asking for it. It means
No,
that the
no.
idea is that you have to dress that way to get
That
your
there
job
is
done.
a culture of using your feminine wiles even if you don't use them. But you need to attract the eyes of some of these little lecherous old men. And maybe they'll hug you a little too tight. Like, why are you hugging me anyway? This is a professional setting. Like, so and it's not their fault. It's the fault of the people they work for, who's like, no, you don't have to do anything
Well, Harry.
to get
You know,
anybody to do anything. Like, don't do that.
I'm wondering if I could comment on this, but
He's like, be careful. Okay, maybe you should tell me, and then I'll be your
No, this
loser.
is such a
I
conversation.
I don't judge women by their attire, but I think it's almost like if they're not using your whole skill set, right? If you can't use your feminine wiles if you could use it, why not use it? You know, now it's on the man to not expect it, you know, and that's a different thing. But if you could use your influence, a pretty smile or whatever, to get in the door, you should be able to use it.
And I think you're absolutely right, Harry. And I will say that I have
You've used your feminine wiles.
I have used whatever God-given talents I have. Whether it is my smile or the sound of my voice in a much pleasing manner than right now, if that helps me do whatever I need to do, I have done it.
Esther or escort? That is the question on Pundit
Esther
Friday.
is an escort.
At 103. We are Vashti fans at my synagogue. She said no
but
to the king.
I agree with Harry in the sense
and what
that
does she end up with?
I agree with Harry in the sense
Her name in
that
history.
that what he said about men's response to it, right?
Right.
Because men don't dress like. Let's imagine a world where women are powerful, and if men have any manly wiles, like I don't know, would they? I wouldn't be offended if they tried to use them on me to influence me, but long as they understand I don't have to respond.
Right.
Like
Right.
you're using, like, you can use what you got to get what you want, Players Club. But I don't actually have to give it to you, right? Like, just because you're like putting the moves on me.
Right. Well, I
Like
mean, what's that age-old adage of you get more flies with honey?
That's right. So yes.
So what
I'm
do you
gonna
think
be
that
nice.
means?
I might be nice if it's to my advantage to be nice.
Yes.
But if it's my advantage to be a whole jerk,
You know, I've actually
that should also
found
be
that
acceptable.
I think that people aren't always honest about what it means to flirt. Like, I found that you can quote unquote flirt with a person in a completely non-sexual way where it's so clear
Mhm.
that you're not hitting on them, you're not trying to give them the impression you're hitting on them. That you can make it really clear that you're not trying to be instant sex, but you're being intimate in a different way, which is you're having fun and you're talking about personally and you're making jokes. But that I think that people pretend
that it doesn't happen.
that doesn't happen when you're
I think
in
where
fact
people
intentionally
go
letting it
wrong
happen.
are the people who are very clear that they're flirting, and then the person who they're flirting with is very clear that they're not receiving.
Mhm.
Or, and we've had probably this discussion 1,000 times, where the power dynamics exist, where it's your boss who's flirting with you, and you're like, this is weird. Like, and even if you can't say, look, man, back off. I'm not, whatever this is, stop. But if this person is trying to avoid you, and like the fact that you don't get it, that you keep advancing the issue, that's where things get wrong.
Mhm.
So
Things didn't go right for Brian Anderson. He's a guy who's been involved in New Haven stuff for a long time. He knows in Milford, used to run the housing authority. And he was going to take on Rosa DeLauro from the left. Rosa DeLauro is our congresswoman. She's even beloved by Bernie Sanders, or the icon of the left, for her positions. But Brian Anderson was speaking for a lot of Bernie-type people when he said she's a good congresswoman. She's been in a long time, 28 years. She's running for re-election. And he said, you know what? I want to push her harder on universal health care. So Rosa's for it, but she didn't go for a single-payer bill. She didn't think that was going to be passed. She thought it'd get there more incrementally. He said, we got to get people out of Afghanistan right now. She's been against wars there, but again, she's more of like, let's see what we can get now. And he was hoping to challenge her, and he started a year early before the election. He got nowhere, nowhere, and he dropped out this week. Now he's any thoughts on that? Rosa's looking like a shoo-in now to be there 30 years.
I mean, I think, first of all, stop running on against people saying, I think they've been in there too long. Don't let that be your message.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And
bring something to the table.
what?
Because
was
some people
he-
say being there longer, I get more done. Some people say being there longer, you're out of touch. Like Rosa would say, Rosa's a very influential legislator. She was pretty much from the beginning because she knew Washington, but definitely got more influential as she had more years, more seniority.
I mean, I
and
think
how that
people get it twisted about this idea of politics and how long people ought to be in politics, and this idea of I'm not a politician, they're a career politician. I mean, it works both ways. We want someone to be influential. We want her to be able to make moves on behalf of our state. You don't get that when you just get there day one.
Now you're going to see that issue come up on the west side of town if Darryl Brackeen and all their young man, I guess for people, I mean, you consider him young, he might be in his 30s, and he's running, he's at least starting to run, we'll see if it continues, a Democratic primary challenge to State Rep Pat Dillon, who has been in her job since the 1984 election.
Mm-hmm.
34 years. Now, some people feel that Pat actually knows how things work better than almost everyone.
She
'cause
does.
she's
The
so smart,
woman is
she's
able
been
to
there.
get budget money when
Other
nobody's
people
supposed to
have
be getting
said
budget
that,
money.
that's a long time for one person to be in, and the demographics have partly changed in the neighborhood. Any thoughts? Is this still how you feel about that race?
No, I
perhaps?
mean, I feel like if people listen,
it's always good to run.
it's always good to run. It's,
Choices.
and you can challenge,
And it
and
makes
if you
people better.
mobilize people who get behind you and want to see you do it, then do it.
And you beat.
You know, if you get
Congratulations.
beat, you get beat. If you win, you win. You know, I don't think however long somebody should be in should be your sole reason for running.
And I think we're always talking about an ideal and a reality, right? The ideal would be that a career legislator would not necessarily handpick somebody, but like somebody
Groom
who's
someone.
interested, somebody from the same party would groom
Yes,
somebody.
groom someone.
Groom somebody and say, look, I'm going to retire. Don't lie about it, but I'm going to retire in another 2 terms.
But then they never do.
Exactly. And that's the reality, is that people who run and say, I'm not going to be a career politician. I'm different. I'm not a career politician. And then they go off to be a career politician for the exact reason that Babs said, which is that you gain influence by seniority.
Just like the Democrats who were
And that
elected
means something when you're out of power.
the 1974.
That means something
class.
when you're out of power.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're, a long-term
Tea Party.
legislator, even when the whatever swings as far left or right, that you're like, yo, I don't even know where the center is anymore. But you have relationships with people. Like, it's amazing the kinds of relationships that people had during the civil rights movement where they're like, look, I can't get out front and actually do this, but this is what I can do behind the scenes.
I think it also depends on the support that you still have with your constituents, because your job as a legislator is to also make sure that you're going to be reelected by your constituent.
Absolutely.
And that's the story with Pat Dillon. They have good constituent support, and so does Rosa DeLauro, which is the big difference with Crisco. Crisco got beat by a Republican, by Logan. Why? He was already
Joe
too many
Crisco,
years. Joe
state
Crisco.
senator.
He had been there too many years. He was older, and we have a young,
population that was ready for change.
and an African American.
Logan was a dynamic candidate.
Yeah.
And that's
Pulitzer Prize. New Haven
New
had
Haven got
three winners of the Pulitzer Prize. James Foreman, who wrote a book that blew
Very
me
good
away,
book.
Locking
Yeah.
Up Our Own.
Very
about,
good book.
About the complex. We could talk about another show.
I know. I haven't read it yet, so.
Oh, you.
Oh my gosh, you have to read it.
I know. I have
Babs.
so many
So
books I have to
good.
read.
7 minutes.
So good.
That book goes by so
It's like,
fast, even though it's nonfiction. The detail it
It's
gets
so
into
good.
about how black ministers and congressmen actually local
And it has
legislators
a good
created
conversation
the
about the gun
mandatory
debate
minimums.
and why there are black people who are very much supporters of gun ownership, because that was the only difference between keeping the Klansmen out your yard and
But also how the
it's
war
so good.
on
It's so
drugs
layered.
and locking up people, he said, started in part with black ministers and legislators who didn't see the repercussions, but he saw them firsthand.
And I
and it
know-
has
I mean,
the
I
As a public
marijuana debate
defender.
in there. Oh,
and
it's
how he
so
watched
layered.
it as a public defender was really amazing. And also, we should just mention Jake Halpern and Michael Sloan. They did that wonderful graphic novel style cartoon series about a New Haven family, Syrian refugee resettlement in the time.
Yes.
So, way to go, Pulitzer Prize winners in New Haven. We're proud of you.
Yay! Greatest
And I'm
little
proud
city
of
in
the best.
America.
Joe
That's right.
Ugly has shown up with a note from the teacher. You are not
He
Mark
got on his
Tardy,
professor
sir.
sweater.
We missed you, even though it was a professor-ish episode today. And thank you for joining us today on Dateline New Haven for Pundit Friday. So Joe, is Mark present? Babs Rolls Ivy.
Hey.
You got to look. You have to do detention with Harry though.
Markeisha Ricks. Norma Rodriguez Reyes. Harry Dross. And yes, Joe Ugly, the recognized ringleader of Risque Repartee, Eighth Wonder of the World, and Wizard of Wise Guy Waggery. All making it happen. Thank you for joining us. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD A Plea for Peace. Now, we know what it's like to be free. We just got to remember to book our flight. Book it and fly free with us all weekend long at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.